Hey guys, welcome to ClownWorld, and in this video we are going to find out what AI is actually for. We've got a video here from Jacob Whalen. He's done some research and he has some ideas. In other words, what are they really doing all this stuff with AI? Like there's always like what they tell you, and there's the narrative that most people get, and then a lot of times there's some stuff going on behind the scenes. And with something as big as AI, it's not too far-fetched to imagine that there is some kind of alternative. And a lot of people have already been looking down this road as to what kind of can really take place with AI, but apparently he's done a little bit of research and he's got some theories that we can find out what's going on here. I've not watched this video yet, so we're going to find out together. Let's go ahead and get started.
AI is being talked about ad nauseum, and I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting pretty much sick and tired of hearing about it. And isn't that kind of ironic that this is a video talking about AI? But this is not your average, typical AI video, I promise you that. Because the big question that's on everyone's mind that is not being answered is, what in the world is the end goal? What is all this for? All this technology? All this
I gotta admit, that thought has crossed my
all
mind.
these data centers and all this money that's being funneled into it?
And you do have to wonder, like, with all these data centers being created, like, these things are massive. And like, how many of these things do we really need, and why do we need, like, what are they really doing? There's a lot of controversy around these things. So, I'm interested to see what he has to say here.
Endgame here. Nobody seems to be able to answer it. And that is why I took some time to dig into this as deeply as I possibly could, and I took down some notes. And I want to share those with you because I think answering this question is very, very important. And I just want to say straight up front, this is for entertainment purposes only. I'm just some crazy guy with a camera that has no idea what I'm talking about. There's no evidence to back any of this stuff up. Wink, wink. So I'll tell you what I did. I looked into some of the current happenings that's going on with AI. I documented that. And then I listened to what the people are saying. Because again, nobody can answer the question about what AI is actually going to be used for. Because when you look at the actual data and what they're saying it's going to be used for, it doesn't add up.
Well, we know what the main use is. I mean, it is very useful, for just doing research and getting information without having to do all the digging yourself. But there is still that thing in the back of a lot of people's minds, like, what could this be used for? What might they be doing behind the scenes?
I scoured the web and I found all of the theories that people have on this topic, and I documented those. And I'll just tell you that the last theory is pretty darn crazy. It's actually kind of shocking, a little bit scary. But we're going to go through all 5 of these. I found 5. And oh, by the way, as I go through this, I'm going to try to remove all bias and conjecture from this conversation and just focus on the facts. So I'm not really going to give my input about what I think about this stuff.
Well, that's fine. I'll give mine.
It's just going to be what I have observed. And I want to hear y'all's input on this as well. I want to know, which theory do you think is most plausible? And it doesn't have to be just one. It could be numerous theories. Maybe it's a combination of all of them. But I want to hear y'all's input on this. But the first thing that we need to do before we dig into the theories is talk about some of the stuff that's happening that doesn't add up. So here's a big one here. So Coweta County, Georgia. Okay, they're implementing eminent domain, and they're trying to take over 330 private properties to expand the power out there.
That's a lot.
And all that power is going to be basically funneled straight into a $17 billion data center project. It's called Project Sale. It's going to take up 830 acres. So the people that basically have eminent domain forced upon them, some of them are actually filing lawsuits against the county and against the state for trying to...
Yeah, and so that's the other thing. Like, it's not just that they're building data centers. Like, they are like this instance right here. Like, they're trying to literally just take people's property so that they can build these data centers. So it's not... Right away, you have to wonder right there, like, if this was not that urgent as part of their agenda to accomplish something, would they really be going through all of this? You know, when you look at the amount of power that these things use, the amount of water that these things use, and all these other resources, how they're disrupting like communities and in cities and people, like, you have to wonder, because there are other ways that they could do this, you know, but they seem to be on a mission through whatever means possible to build these things as big as possible, as quickly as possible. So right away, that sends up some red flags as far as I'm concerned.
Take their property. Because to those people in Georgia, this doesn't really make any sense. They're putting this AI infrastructure above the people. They're willing to take their land, and they're willing to put their power and their energy grids at risk to power this data center. It just doesn't add up for these people. It doesn't add up for a lot of people from what I'm finding. And there's another project that's happening. It's called, I don't know what this one's called, but it's happening at Lake Tahoe. And basically what's happening here is that NV Energy is now telling the residents of Lake Tahoe, there's about 49,000 of them, that they're going to have to find their own source of power. Because come, what is it, May 2027, they're going to stop providing 75% of all electricity, and they're going to basically redirect that to data center projects. Kind of sounds very similar to the thing happening in Coweta County, Georgia. And this one's kind of crazy because the energy prices for these people out there around Lake Tahoe has already risen 77% since 2022 because of AI infrastructure. Again, this is another one of those situations where the power grids are basically being stressed to the limit. They're putting these data centers and the AI infrastructure over the people. It doesn't really add up. And another thing that's happening is in Utah. You might have heard this one, but in Utah, this was just recently announced. Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, all right, he just announced that they're going to be breaking ground on a 40,000 acre data center project. 40,000 acres. Now, when I first read this, I was like, there's no way this can be true. It has to be made up. People are getting the numbers wrong. Something's not right. But I did a lot of research into this, and it is actually 40,000 acres. That is 62 square miles, roughly the size of Washington, D.C. This is going to be a data center compound. And this apparently went to local jurisdiction there in Utah.
See, what do they need that for?
People traveled from all over to protest this, but apparently the decision was already made before they even had the hearing, and they approved it. So it's going to happen.
And who's they?
This is going to use
Who approved
9 gigawatts of power once it's totally done. Now keep in mind that the entire state of Utah, all infrastructure and all residences combined, only uses 4 gigawatts a year. This is going to use 9. It is going to use natural gas, and it's supposedly going to be emitting 35 million metric tons of carbon emissions every single year. The entire state only emits 55 million metric tons a year. So it's going to raise the state's emissions by 64%. That also doesn't really add up to people, because when you think about that, what have we been hearing for the last couple decades? Climate change. We need to reduce global emissions. But now we have a single data center. This is just one, keep that in mind, that is going to be emitting that much more carbon emissions.
Okay, I had to change the battery died in my earbud. Let me back this up just a second here, make sure.
Global emissions. But now we have a single data center.
So he's making a good point here. Like, if everybody's all crying about, climate change and, carbon emissions and all this kind of stuff, but with these data centers are pumping out like megatons more than what we're already doing. And this is, the same people behind this stuff are kind of the same people who are in the same climate change boat. So what's really going on here? Why are they so concerned about? Well, obviously I know the answer. We know the answer that climate change is all a bunch of garbage. Like, who, maybe the earth is warming up a little bit, but like that's just kind of how the cycle of things work when you stretch the time out a lot longer, and they're just using this information to try and push forward carbon credits and tax us even more and all kinds of bullshit to further their agenda. So that part's obvious. We know that, that's a bunch of hogwash, generally speaking, whether the planet's actually warming up or not. It's not having anything to do with human beings being the main culprit. So, but at the same time, they're contradicting themselves, and they're really showing that the whole thing is kind of a scam. So let's continue on here.
Emitting that much more carbon emissions, but now that doesn't seem to matter. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this infrastructure more important? And another thing about this is that they want to use floating solar panels and other renewable energy sources to power this thing. And in order for them to install enough floating solar panels in the Great Salt Lake to power this giant data center, it's going to take up another 40,000.
They got like millions of acres of land out there that they can use that's being used for absolutely nothing, because you can't use it for anything. It's just like barren desert. But why wouldn't they just use that instead of trying to fill the lake with floating panels? Like, that doesn't even make any sense to me.
1,000 acres. But that's going to be 40,000 acres of the lake. And what they're saying is that amount of solar panels would cover 16% of the lake's northern arm. And this lake has already dropped, I think, 20-some% over the last, I think, 2 decades or something like that. But again, that doesn't seem to matter. And when
like, what would happen, like, to the whatever is living in that lake? I mean, I know it's like highly, I mean, I don't honestly. I'm sure there's fish in there, but like, if they're not getting sunlight or they're reducing the sunlight, like, what's the consequences of that going to be?
All this stuff that doesn't seem to matter anymore, it gets even crazier, because from the research I've done, we'll go through some other stuff here. All right, so most of these data centers, and what I read was 80 to 90% of these data centers use water in some capacity. And when they use water, 80 to 90% of these data centers pull it from a water source. That could be a lake, a stream, a well, an underground aquifer. It doesn't really matter what the source is, but it's always going to be a natural source of water that these data centers pull from. Now, some of that gets recycled and it gets put back into the environment. Some of it doesn't. And some of the water that is recycled and put back into the environment is discharged as wastewater. Now, it's supposed to be clean before it goes back out, but that is not necessarily the case with all of this stuff. And from what I read, a medium-sized data center uses around 100 million gallons of water a year. All right. A large hyperscale data center uses around 1 to 5 million gallons of water per day. And all of the data centers here in the U.S. currently use a combined total of 449 million gallons of water per day. And what makes that even crazier is that the water that's discharged back into the
That's a lot, and that's a lot in a short amount of time. Like, how long have these data centers even been in existence? So you go from, like, not using 400 some million gallons a day to, in just a few years, now consuming 400 plus million gallons a day of water across the country. That's a lot of water. Like, how long can that, how sustainable is that? Until that starts causing some real problems.
A lot of that is discharged back in the form of water vapor. So it doesn't necessarily go straight back into the ground. It just evaporates and it goes back into the water cycle. So the problem with that, though, is that these data centers use water at a rate that is much faster than it takes the natural water cycle to replenish the water supplies in the ground or the lakes or the streams. So what happens is these natural water supplies end up running dry. This also doesn't make sense to a lot of people because, again, certain things that supposedly matter or are supposed to matter suddenly don't matter when it comes to AI. And when you think about the amount of power and water that's currently being used for these AI data centers, that is only powering and supplying water to 5,500. That's roughly about how many there are in the U.S. Now, over the next 4 years,
5,500 data centers?
there are supposed to be
That sounds like
more
a
than
lot.
12,000 of these data centers in
Good
operation.
Lord.
They're investing over $5.2 trillion into AI infrastructure over the next 4 years. That's pretty wild. So that means that all of this water is going to be consumed at much higher rates. That means that all of this power is going to be rerouted and consumed at much higher rates. That means our natural resources are going to be stressed. It means that our power grids are going to be stressed. It means that more people are probably going to be displaced. It means that more farmland is probably going to be consumed. That means that less food can be grown. And it also means that there's going to be more carbon emissions. Because the crazy thing about all the power that's being used is a lot of the current power infrastructure and the energy plants that are in place, they run on coal burning fuel. So that's a lot more carbon emissions. So that leads us to the multi-million-dollar question, and that is, what is so doggone important about AI that these people are willing to put everything at risk in order to scale it up?
Well,
What is so doggone
it's a
important
good question. Why
that
don't
they're
you tell
willing
us?
to invest $5.2 trillion into it over the next 4 years? This is where things get interesting, because this is where the theories come in. And the first theory that I found is that maybe AI is a big nothing burger. Maybe they're investing all this money into it and it's just going to amount to nothing, because they're already saying that AI is not going to be profitable, and it is not profitable, and they think the bubble is going to pop. So maybe that's exactly what happens. Maybe they think that this is going to go somewhere, and they're putting all their stock and money and resources into it, thinking that it's going to amount to something spectacular, and maybe it just fizzles out. Maybe all these big AI
I'm not
data
really
centers
sure
just
about that. I think that, saying something like that would be like saying that the internet is going to amount to nothing, which people were saying. Cryptocurrency is going to amount to nothing, which people were saying. And all these things, proved that they were not just a flash in the pan going to amount to nothing. And I don't think AI is going to do that either. There's too many people already, dependent on it. So if anything, it's just going to continue to grow, would be my opinion.
become big ghost towns and life continues on as normal. We've seen waste like this happen before, so I guess it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that's going to happen. So that's the first theory. The second theory is that AI creates automation and efficiency, and it improves everything at such an unprecedented rate that it creates absolute euphoria and a utopia. And we enter a technological revolution. Everything becomes easier. Life as we know it is just basically easy. I mean, we literally enter a golden era. And everything's done for us. Robots come in and they take care of all the work, and we don't need money anymore because everything's so efficient and everything runs so smoothly. And we all just kick back and we can do whatever the heck we want. And we get a universal basic income check. And we're free to just explore.
See, the problem with that is that when is the last time any of these power-hungry globalists have ever done anything that's in the interest of the little guy? And I think that the answer to that is pretty much never. Because they're only interested in themselves. If anything, they want to exterminate us and get rid of the majority of us because we're just like a thorn in their side and we're in their way and we're breathing their air and all that kind of stuff. That's been proven. They've been on record, a lot of these guys actually saying those types of things. So the notion that, maybe the robots take over and they displace a lot of people in their jobs, but I don't think that they're going to be too excited to rush in and take care of us and provide a universal basic income and all this kind of stuff. Maybe if you get your digital ID and you're now in the system and you've got your social credit score and everything is tracked, and they can turn off your ability to interact with society at a moment's notice if you step out of line. Maybe they'll do that, and they'll funnel us all into 15-minute cities, and we'll all be living on top of each other in high-rise buildings that house 1 million people each, and it'll just be miserable, right? But that's You get your universal basic income, but your quality of life is not going to be great at all. Possibly that could be an outcome, but this notion that we're going to be in some sort of utopia, because AI is doing all the heavy lifting for us, and the rest of us are all just going to be taken care of, and we're going to just be able to be free to do whatever we want and live a great... No, I don't really see that. We've never seen that. And I think we all kind of know deep down inside that these people who are running the show and in control of everything, they're not going to do that for us. They'll do that for themselves, but they're not going to do that for us. So I don't know about this option 2.
Live life. That's the second theory. And maybe that is an actual very real possibility, because if AI is everything and more that they say it's going to be, and they end up scaling it to artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, AGI, maybe that's exactly what happens. Maybe we just enter an era of abundance, and life as we know it completely transforms, and everything that we ever wanted comes true. Now, theory number 3 takes a little bit of a different turn. Okay, so theory number 3 would be that we end up creating the most powerful and the most unstoppable military and defense system on the planet, and the U.S. and I guess you could say whoever masters AI becomes an unstoppable force, and they just rule the world.
Well, that sounds a little bit closer
to reality. They take over, because when you have that amount of power and that amount of knowledge and resources at your fingertips...
I mean, anything that has to do with military and war and more power, being military power, because that's how you really can strong arm and control everyone else and your population and other countries and all that kind of stuff. You can invade other countries and take over them and take over their resources. That has always been the way it has been. That's the way things have gone. Why would they all of a sudden change now? If anything, artificial intelligence is just another, ultimately the biggest application will probably be another military tool for them to gain more power, and ultimately usher in maybe their new world order, which we think is more like a clown world order, because it's just so ridiculous, everything that they're doing. But yeah, that could actually be a more realistic or plausible explanation far as what I'm concerned, what I've seen.
Your tips, you've basically just won the game. And maybe that's where we're headed. Maybe we're headed towards a technological revolution, but not just one that is more efficient, one that's more powerful, one that allows the reigning force to just conquer the world. And maybe that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Maybe it means that
how could that not be a bad
reigning
thing?
Force and that ultimate power ushers in utopia. Maybe they usher in all the great stuff that I was just talking about.
I hope he's just kidding here.
Maybe it leads to a new world order, and everything just basically changes for the better. And maybe that ultimate power, finally, after all these years and all these decades, ushers in flying cars, zero gravity and robots and all the cool stuff.
Yeah, it's like, what did they say? You're going to own nothing and be happy? That's their idea of utopia for us. They can paint it out to be utopia, but it's not going to be utopia for most people. Except the most brainwashed of people who will buy into any kind of concept that is presented to them or sold to them by the mainstream media. Like, this is, how great is this? You get to live this kind of bullshit life now, and everybody's going to be like, oh, isn't that wonderful? When in fact, the majority of us who still think for ourselves are going to be like, no, this is ridiculous.
Promised for 50, 60 years. I guess that's a possibility. But theory number 4 takes another very sharp turn. And this one's a little bit more dystopian. This one is all about surveillance. So the theory here is that AI is basically going to be used to usher in a surveillance state.
We already have a surveillance
Everything's
state.
going to be policed. It's going to be very dystopian, kind of like 1984. Our every move is going to be watched
We already
and
know they're
controlled
moving
and
towards
dictated.
that.
They're going to move to the digital dollar and the social credit system and the carbon credit system. And there's going to be all this AI technology integrated in our cars and our homes with smart meters and kill switches. And basically, we'll just be surrounded by technology. Maybe we'll even have technological implants. And if we misbehave,
we've already been moving in that direction.
or we go over our carbon
so that's just
allowance,
gonna continue. It's not
or
gonna
we
stop.
do
It's just
something
gonna
that
get worse.
they don't like, they shut us off. They turn off our cars. They don't allow us to drive. We have mileage limits. We can only go so far because of the climate and carbon and all that stuff. Maybe the power grids are stressed so much and we're all blamed for it. So they limit us, using our heat and our air conditioning.
Of course they'll blame us for it.
And because so many people are displaced
they've already done this. Didn't they do this like in Europe or something? Like just this past winter, like they couldn't even use their heating. They were so short on fuel. These people couldn't use heat to heat their homes, so they're all like shivering to death in their flats or whatever. Like they've already been doing this. They're just going to continue to do this. Like this is. We'll just continue on here.
All this stuff going on, and these data centers and all the technology taking over our land and our property. Most people out here in these rural areas will be forced into 15-minute cities, and our every single move will be watched, controlled, and dictated.
That's what I just said.
We'll have everything there in our 15-minute city that we could ever possibly want, and that's the new reality. That's the new world. And from what I've read about this theory, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Again, maybe
how that could be a good thing.
A place of abundance. Maybe that is a crime-free
unless you're a sheep
world, because everything's monitored. You don't have to worry about crime because if somebody commits a crime, it's on camera.
There's always going to be crime.
Dispatched or a drone is dispatched and it takes out the criminal. And we don't have to worry about anything. Everything's handed to us. We're in our 15-minute city. We don't have to go anywhere outside of that. We have everything in those cities that we could ever possibly...
Yeah, you also don't have to worry about crime if you are locked and loaded and practicing your Second Amendment rights to carry and keep yourself armed.
We want. And life is just all grand. Everything is taken care of for us. That's how some people view it. Other people, on the other hand...
Some people are naive.
A little worse than that. They view it more dystopian. They think that it would literally be a real-life version of 1984, and some people simply don't align with that. But nonetheless, that is the going theory for theory number 4. And theory number 5 is quite a bit more dystopian, and I would say actually apocalyptic. Because theory number 5, this one gets pretty wild. What this one is about is that AI is quite literally going to replace us. Not in the sense that it's going to force us out of our homes and our land and it's going to take our jobs away and do all the stuff that we would normally be doing. It's not going to replace us in that way. It is going to replace us because we quite literally won't be here. And what I mean by that is that there is going to be some sort of catastrophic event, some sort of cyclical catastrophe that happens, and it wipes out the vast majority of the population. And the going theory here is that this is one of those things that happens ever so often, and there's really nothing we can do about it. It's just the way the world works, and it's kind of the luck of the draw. And when I really dove into this, I could see how that would be a possibility, because there is evidence of that throughout our history, of some sort of cyclical catastrophe basically wiping everything out, and then it starting over and building back up, and that event, that process basically happens over and over and over. There's a lot of text and literature that points to this. The Bible is one of those things, and a lot of ancient texts from even Egypt and the Mayans, and I would say just about every civilization across the world, they all talk about some sort of event that happens and wipes everybody out. And the one that you'll probably recognize the most is the flood, the Great Flood. It's referred to as different names throughout different cultures, but all cultures talk about the Great Flood. So maybe that is what we're going to be facing. And something else that ties into that theory, as I research this, is that people believe that's a possibility because maybe that's why all these bunkers are being built. You got all these rich billionaires and stuff making these big bunkers all over the place and are digging tunnels and stuff. So it could tie into that. Maybe that's why there's such urgency to scale AI to the moon over the next 4 years, because it's going to happen soon. And the whole reason for AI is because it's going to replace the people that won't be here. They need something to keep the system going, the economy going, and they need something to keep the world turning, basically. And AI will be the thing that does that. And as you research this theory, it also kind of makes sense, because maybe that's why there's this big push for fake meat and fake food, and maybe that's why you've got planes flying over blocking out the sun, because maybe there's something actually happening. that they're trying to protect the world from. Maybe that's also why they're diversifying AI and the infrastructure for AI so much, and they're putting it all around the world in all these different places, because they know that there's a very good chance that a lot of it's going to be wiped out. So the more they put out there and the more diverse they make the geographic locations, the better chance that this AI has of surviving. And maybe that's also why they don't care about displacing us right now. They're willing to put everything at risk and stress the grids and push the people out of their homes.
You know, the thing about that, though, is that, you know, the AI can survive even if no data centers survive. They could have AI on a floppy disk sitting in a bunker somewhere and then boot that thing back up once everything settles down on one computer. They don't necessarily need massive data centers to do that. So although I agree with this theory, you know, to a point where, yeah, some major catastrophic event could happen, or it could just be the globalists trying to manufacture an event to wipe the majority of us out and then use AI to fill in the gaps for all the work that we used to do so that they can still continue on with their quality of life. But the notion that the globalists and these people who probably do have some indication that maybe something is going to happen, and maybe they have, well, they definitely have a lot more information than us on just about everything, and they keep it secret. You know, but the idea that they're doing all this to you know, preserve AI, I just don't know that they need data centers that big. You know, if there's only a few people left on the planet, you know, if there's only 1 billion people left as opposed to 8 billion or whatever, well, I don't know that they would necessarily need data centers that big right away. I mean, AI can run, you know, I think on, they can preserve it without having all this massive infrastructure, and then they can build that back. I mean, especially if most of them are just going to get wiped out if they really do have that information. But who knows? I could be wrong on that speculation too.
And use our natural resources and take over our farmland and use our water and, you know, all this stuff, and put carbon emissions into the atmosphere and all this stuff, because they know it doesn't matter. They know that it's all in vain, because something is going to happen, and it is imperative that this AI infrastructure is there so that they have something to keep the world going. And also maybe so that they can use AI to figure out how to stop it, or to figure out how to build back, because maybe they believe that that's the only thing that's smart enough to find a solution. And the more I dug into this theory and researched it, I found that there were a lot of people talking about the Great Replacement theory, talking about the population reduction. There was stuff referencing the Georgia Guidestones and a Deagle report, and the elites of the world talking about how by 2030 there's going to be a massive population reduction of like 70%. And you know, all this stuff's theory, but it's there. And I just want to present to you what I found. Now, whether or not any of this stuff's true, again, there's no telling. And I'm not going to tell you my opinion. It really doesn't matter at this point, because what I think is more important than all that is to just take all this information in. Look at the theories that are being put out there, because from those theories...
Well, I'll give you my opinion then. I think that the third, fourth, and fifth options are probably the most likely outcomes. One of those three, if not all three, probably a little bit of all three, especially this option number 3, the military angle, as well as, you know, the fourth theory that they're going to turn this into, you know, to aid their surveillance state, which is already there. It's already massive. Like, you know, Edward Snowden, you know, he spilled the beans on what the NSA was doing. That was a long time ago, you know, before AI was really a big thing. Like, this is just going to enhance all of that, make it faster, more efficient, more effective. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that they will be using this for that. There's no doubt that they're going to be using it for the military. They're going to weaponize it. And most likely, you know, whether the human population is reduced from some sort of a natural event like a pole shift or any kind of thing that, you know, the next ice age, who knows whatever it could be, or it's engineered, you know, by the globalists themselves, you know, and they have these plans in place. They go to Davos and they scheme up these things. They have like their private meetings that they don't even let the media come and participate in unless you're a key person in the media and you're on the inside too, is, you know, like, but you're not reporting that stuff on the news to the masses. You know, it's all a secret. And so they're scheming these things for us like they always have been doing. And, you know, I'm sure that they're going to be using that to replace the workforce. And if nothing, no catastrophes happening, man-made or natural, then it's going to replace us anyways. And those people are just going to be kicked to the street and left on Skid Row to die out naturally because they can't, there's nothing they can do anymore to participate in society. And, you know, that they're just going to have AI doing all the rest of the work for them that needs to be done. And these people, you know, they'll just kind of be discarded. And these people don't care. These elites, they don't really care about that. You know, and they would love nothing more than to see the population thinned out. And with the state of affairs and the kind of clown world that we live in, you can hardly blame them sometimes. Like, some of the people out there, it's just like, who are these people? Where did they come from? You know, can you not act like a normal human being anymore? So that's it. I'll leave the link for this video in the description below. So if you want to watch the video, or if you want to see what else he's got out there, or subscribe, or whatever you want to do, you can do that. But that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.